today I wanted to come on and chat about phonics in year one. The biggest thing in phase 5 is they start, so when they're in reception, they learn lots of single sounds, and they also learn that two letters can go together to make one sound, such as this one here. So we've got A and I, and when we put them together, it makes the sound A. When they get to phase 5, they should know there's 44 sounds in the English language. They should know one way to represent each of those sounds. However, there's loads of different ways that they can write those and that they'll see them in writing. So the first thing they're going to learn in year 1 in phase 5 is that some of those sounds can look different. So we call a sound that we can hear, we call a phoneme. Remember it like talking on a phone, you can hear it. When we see it written down, that's called a grapheme. And I remember like drawing graphs at school, so grapheme is drawing, it's how it's written down. So when we put them together, that's grapheme, phoneme correspondence. So they will match what they hear to how they know it looks. So this is an example of something they already know, A. And then in my phase 5 box, there are some different sounds. There are new graphemes, new ways that they might look. So here, this is one of the phase 5 cards. That phase 3 sound is in the corner of the card to remind children that they already know that sound, that's A, but this is a new way that it might look. AY is a new way we can write that sound down, we can represent it. So phase 5 is all about expanding what they see so that they start to realise that sometimes a sound is going to look different. So for example, when we had in my phase 3 word pack, there are lots of words that contain that phase 3 sound, so how they first learnt it, AI. So they will learn to read words with it in. So aim. So the sound buttons on that side to help them spot it. And then what we want them to start doing is spotting that sound in the word themselves. So children probably are quite familiar with this once they get into year 1. So they're good at spotting. So they will see this word and they might think, right, I can spot a digraph. I know those two letters are the A sound. Then they'll sound it out. Wait. And then we've got the sound buttons to show them. So what they're going to do when they get to phase 5, so in the phase 5 pack, they will have word cards again, because what they're going to do now is they're going to see a word and they might think, I don't know that word, I can't sound that word out, because they don't recognise any of the sounds that go together yet. So that's what they're learning. They're learning that this is another way to represent that sound, so they're spotting this sound this time. So if we have a look at the sound buttons and lines, they'll see, oh yeah, those two go together. They need to learn a new way now. So they've got another sound to learn, but it sounds like one they already know. So they've got to connect that. So this is another way to write A. So A, say. And the words that come in that pack will have CVC, but I've also tried to include some of those CCVCs or CVCCs, the phase 4 ones we talked about last time, where two consonants go together. So it's that step on from phase 3. So we've got A, play. Sometimes 3 consonants will go together. So we've got A, spray. And then there's also some multiple syllable words, because again, that's what they were practicing phase 4. So we've got crayon. So if they have a long word and they're stuck sounding out, get them to try the first 3, maybe 4 sounds. So A, cray. Then do the other half, on, and then put those 2 symbols together, crayon, crayon. So that's what phase 5 is about. There's lots of new sounds, not for all of the sounds they've already learnt, just for some of them. And the cards have got at the top, so here's another one, the pronunciation they should already know to support them. So these ones here look a little bit different, and if you follow my stories when I made the cards, we had quite a discussion about how to do the line for a digraph, because you'll notice in the words where I showed you before, the straight line shows where 2 or 3 letters work together to make one sound. When they have something called a split digraph, and I've got a story to show you in a minute, I've used a curved line. Some schools would draw the line over the top like a rainbow. We've gone for the smile. I was concerned when I made it, it looked a bit like boobs, but people reassured me it was okay. So if you think it's a boob, I'm really sorry. There was a lot of discussion around making them. So split digraphs, I'm going to talk about those now. So when we introduce children in phase 5 to some of the sounds, there's a new sound. These are called split digraphs. And as you can see, there's a line, because these are going to have a letter that sneak in between them. So there's 5 of them. So they make the vowel sound. So we've got A, and there's the A sound from before. We've got E, There's the sound from before. I, zoom a bit closer. There's I was a trigraph when they learnt it before, 3 letters. O, and they learnt that as OA. Get my finger the wrong way around. OA. And you can make a y, sound or an oo sound. So the way I introduced it with my class when I did it is I had these on pieces of paper and I got children to come out and read the letters. I'm going to try and remember the story off the top of my head. I have written it down as a handout if you want to do it with your child, so I'm going to try and remember it. But so I introduced it as there was a letter whose name was I. And I walked around and said its name. I. There was a letter, E, who was really shy and didn't like to say her name. So she held hands with I, and you'll see I've placed them in the same box on this phoneme frame because they're going to go together. They're holding hands. And as they walked around, I said her name, but E was really quiet. So they walked around saying I. They were a digraph. They worked together to make one sound. And as they were walking around, P came along. So they squeezed up. And P, he didn't say his name, his letter name, he used his sound. P, p, p. And he held hands. Because he's got his own sound, he's going in his own box. But they're going to work together now to make a word. So they said I, pie. So they walked around saying pie. Now, N came along, and N didn't want to go at the end. N wanted to squeeze in the middle. And he split up this digraph. And he stuck in between them. Now, they still said their name. N said his sound, I still said I, and E was still quiet, but they still worked together. So we show children this by drawing a line that goes underneath to connect those letters, because they're still making one sound, they're still a digraph, but now they've been split up. So you will hear people coming, your child coming home and saying split digraph. I learnt this as a magic E. So when we saw this E at the end, it changed the word, a magic E. They don't use that term anymore, they will use split digraph. So now we have P making the sound, I saying her name, saying and then this one is quiet. So when we read the word now, it says pine. So just use that to explain what a split digraph was. They were together, and then a consonant sneaks in and splits them up. So on the cards for those split digraphs, this is how I've just put them down. You can see there's a dash because that's where a consonant will sneak in, and they will still say oo or you, and it will still say a. And they tend to make, and at the end of the story there's a little bit about how if you see an E at the end of a word, it might have a friend. So these are the friends, the digraph together. So this letter, they tend to say their letter name, so A instead of A, and E, and I, and O, and U, or sometimes oo. So if they're seeing a word like this in their reading, and it's got an I at the end, it might be like a silent, so tell them to look at the letter that's would be joined to it and make that one say its name, and that sometimes helps them with reading split digraph words. So there's also in the pack some words there, again, no sound buttons and sound buttons to help them. So here you would say, right, well, we can see there's an E at the end. Has it got a friend? Yep, so that's going to say its name. So that's going to say A, S, A, same. So that's split digraphs. And then also the other thing they're going to learn in phase 5 is they're going to learn tricky words still. So there's some tricky words in the phase 5 pack that they're going to learn. In this pack, I've done something to help support with the words. So they have, we say we can't sound out tricky words, but actually you can sound out could, k, d. And I talked about this on my stories the other day. When Benji would have written this in his spelling test the other day, he just wrote C-U-D, k, d. He sounded it out. These cards are to support them with finding which bit is the tricky bit. So the tricky bit is in white, and there's a heart over the bit they need to learn off by heart. So we've got k, d. So this bit, they've never learnt this sound for an We don't teach it as that sound when they've learnt these words. But we can teach them rhymes and things to help them play lots of games. So I taught Benji, oh, you lucky duck, to help remember that spelling in that word. So they'll learn lots of new tricky words. They will learn high frequency words. They're not in this pack. They will be in the next phase 5 pack I do. And then in terms of spelling at the beginning of phase 5, they usually go back and spell. So these are from my phase 2 to 4 pack. They usually go back and spell the phase 4 tricky words. And again, the best way to learn them is playing lots of games, thinking of rhymes. So we did Sophie Anne is dancing. So just finding little ways to remember some of those tricky words. So that's kind of a general overview of the beginning of phase 5 in year 1. More comes, so there's more things they're going to learn. The next part of phase 5 is learning that sometimes we can hear, so these look different but they sound the same. The next thing they're going to do is they can sound the same but look different. So when they've done that, then they move on to spelling and trying to look at spelling rules and things. So don't worry too much if your child is going to write down the word say and they're going to put S-A-I. That's phonetically plausible. You can just say, oh yeah, that does spell say, but in this word it's actually this spelling. But don't worry too much about that at this stage. That's going to come later in phase 5. So you might have heard about the phonics screen check. If you haven't, I'm going to do another live all about that. But the phonics screen check is just something they do in year 1 to assess how well they're doing with reading all the different words and how much of a grip they've got of all the different sounds and how they're represented. So I'll talk more about that next time. When I first learned about phonics, back in like 2007 or something, I sat in a training and it just made no sense to me. And they put up things like this on the board and they said, oh, does anyone know what sound that made? I genuinely had no idea, seeing that written down on a piece of paper, not in the context of a word. I had no idea what that made. And I just have that feeling that, you know, as parents, how many of us are sitting there thinking that? Craig doesn't know them, so Benji comes home with a reader book and Craig's got no idea which ones he can sound out, which sounds he should know. And I just want to be here to support parents so that you have that support. So ask any questions. If you haven't had spellings coming home in year 1 or so far, don't worry. Some schools don't do them at all. I personally don't like spelling tests. Some schools won't started them yet. The main one I would focus on if you do want to work on spellings at home is spelling the tricky words, and go back to the phase 2 to 4, work your way through those, make sure they can spell those ones first before you're worrying about if they can spell those, because that's what they want to make sure they can do in year 1, because the tricky words in this pack are the ones they're going to be writing the most when it comes to writing. So if they can spell them, it's just going to help that fluency when they come to writing. They're not stopping to think about how to spell everything and sounding everything out. We're just giving them those skills. I'm going to start sharing some games on Instagram for phase 5, how you can support your child with that at home. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments on here. And I'll be back next week to talk all about the screen check, which is nothing to worry about. Please do not worry about it. I hope it's been helpful, and I'll be back next week with some more, and I'll share some games this week on Instagram. See you soon!